all tribal. And there would be times where we'd hear gunfire and we're like, are we taking contact? It's like, no, it's one town shooting at the other town. And we're like, well, why? It's like, because who knows?
I did it all wrong. I mean, it's such a joke. Like I got, no tuition assistance whatsoever, paid full freight.
That is a shift. So did you know what you were going to do afterwards? Or just like, I just know I'm going to get out. And then suddenly you're like, I guess once a Marine, always a Marine, but a Marine civilian.
I remember like every night we'd sit on like kind of the porch of one of the hooches and watch the laser light show of like tracers going back and forth between the A&A, down below the high point we were at and Taliban. I don't recommend you leave the military and start something necessarily right away.
I agree. Yeah.
But I do think it's a great place to go really accelerate your career, build an entirely new set of skills that are super transferable and do that.
As we wrap up, like what does the future hold and are you happy? Welcome to the In the Field podcast, where we speak to veterans, service members, and those in the transition process to learn about their stories. James, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
We before the show, we already picked out the MREs, but the first question I ask all my guests is, when was the last time you had an MRE?
I was thinking about that when I was on the way here, and I think it was the last time I was in the field and in the reserves. Actually, it was probably like winter 2016. So it's been almost 10 years.
A hot second. Do you remember any that were like your favorites, or were they all just sustenance?
I mean, definitely. I think this chicken burrito bowl, and anything with like chicken, hot sauce and jalapeno mac is pretty good. Yeah.
I feel like if the MRE has the word bowl in it, it tends to be one of the better ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were talking about the patties and how to stay away from that.
Yeah, the maple sausage patty, I remember not being a great outcome.
I will say, because we've had it on the show, they've improved the recipe quite a bit on the patty.
Okay.
And so I
give
won't
it a
say
try.
it's like great, but it is better than it was. So as we open these up, and you'll have to try this trail mix beef jerky because it is legitimately very good.
Might need your knife over here.
Oh yeah, sometimes.
It's been a while, a lot of practice.
I know, it's like a use it or lose it kind of skill.
Yeah, exactly.
Opening up MREs. I've been now doing it for, I think this is episode 18 or 19, so I've gotten my reps in. I haven't gone back to the doctors though yet, so I don't know if my cholesterol and
really killing
my numbers are just like
right
through
now.
the roof right now.
Yeah, we're not 22 anymore.
Exactly. Right? The body's ability to metabolize this stuff isn't as good as it was.
Yep.
But as we open these up and kind of explore what we've got, I would love to hear the story of James, but not really starting at the military, but like before that, like who is like high school or even like middle school, elementary school James growing up?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I was the obvious, end up in the military, end up in the Marine Corps guy. There are much more obvious people. I mean, mediocre athlete. I grew up here, but I was born up here, but then grew up in North Carolina. So, I was a better than average lacrosse player for North Carolina, but that was about it. I wasn't playing college. I wasn't the classic football captain who goes into the Marine Corps after high school or after college. So, non-obvious track. Don't have a huge family history of being in the military, except for, the obvious sort of World War II era that everyone was in. But yeah, I mean, I think, high school, pretty normal, did well in school, was, loved to play sports, but was an average athlete. And then I ended up going to Penn for undergrad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where in North Carolina were you?
Charlotte.
Yeah. Okay. I was, when I first moved to the US, I was in Greensboro and Huntersville.
Okay.
That's right outside of Charlotte.
Absolutely.
For, Greensboro. Yeah. So when you were in high school, I guess you get to Penn, like doing well academically, maybe not great on the sports side.
Wasn't
what
what
were your stats? Can we pull them up? Is that public knowledge?
I don't even know if you'd find them. I mean, I don't think I made All-State or even second team All-State. I mean, our big claim to fame, and it's been funny, I reconnected through business with the star of our high school rival team. We won the North Carolina State Championship in 2005, my senior year, which was a big deal. And this guy was the star of the other side. And we were just ribbing each other in a business meeting a couple of months ago. So yeah,
that's awesome.
Fun.
Yeah. Were you looking at other schools, or was Penn kind of your reach or your?
Coming from Charlotte's changed a lot. I don't know the last time you were in Charlotte, and I'm there a lot. And it was still a town, I think, at that point. And I wanted to go to school in a city. So I looked at Georgetown. I looked at, I looked at New Orleans. I looked at Miami. I looked at BC. I really wanted to be in a major metropolitan area, go to school there.
Got it.
Yeah.
And did you do ROTC while there, or like?
I did it all wrong.
There was no inkling of military.
I did it all wrong. I mean, it's such a joke. Like I got no tuition assistance whatsoever. Paid full freight. My kind of path to OCS was a little non-traditional. So look, everyone at Penn at that point in time was really a finance factory. I mean, everyone went into finance, and it was great because it was a good training, intense experience when you're 22 years old. And so coming out of Penn, I did investment banking. And that's what everyone did. The problem was it was the 2008 financial crisis, so it wasn't like a great time to do investment banking.
Right. You timed the market great. For that.
I mean, just crushed it. Yeah, I mean, just it's funny now we've seen in my professional career 2 or 3 cycles. It's funny. I'm talking to a lot of candidates and hiring a lot of folks right now, and they had the ripper years from 2012, 2013, all the way through the shock in 2020. And they've never seen anything uncertain like this before. Right. But we graduated into it. I think it made us more resilient. Right. Yeah.
And so did you know that you wanted to do finance in college? I mean, I guess if you knew Penn was like a feeder into this field, is that what was driving you, or was there any exploratory phase of your life, especially in the college years?
Well, I definitely had an interest in national security. Okay. I took Arabic in college, for no other reason than maybe it might be useful in my professional career. Right. I studied, in addition to undergraduate business, I studied, international relations. So I had an interest in, the public sector, the national security sector. Right. I wrote my thesis on asymmetric warfare. Okay. So, I had this intellectual interest, but I wasn't sure that I was going to pursue it as a career. And frankly, just sort of the momentum at Penn was, big consulting, big banking is a good place to start the career, which isn't necessarily incompatible with that career track either.
What year were you at Penn? Because you said you graduated into the 2008. Yeah.
So I went to Penn from 2005 to 2009. Okay. I had an offer from Lehman Brothers. Mm-hmm. I had an offer from Barclays. I had an offer from Wells Fargo, First Union. None of these places exist. I ended up going to Credit Suisse, which now doesn't exist anymore either. So it's been a big change, from that period to now especially. But that was a big transformation in investment banking and finance. Yeah.
And you mentioned, studying international relations, studying Arabic. So, we had already at that point, entered into Afghanistan, and entered into Iraq. I guess, did that spur your interest into those fields, or was it outside of the things going on?
No, I really, in the back of my mind, always wanted to go serve in some capacity. Right. And I figured, let's learn the language of the area of operations. Right. I'm good at languages. Arabic's a tough one. It hasn't really stayed with me too well.
I was going to say, how do you say, hello, my name is James?
Alan, it's me, James. It's bad at this point. Yeah.
It's like my Swedish is atrocious.
Yeah. My Spanish and Portuguese are pretty good, but my Arabic is atrophied for sure. Yeah. And then, after all that, I end up in Afghanistan where they speak Pashto and Dari.
Yeah. So it's what are we doing here now?
Exactly. Completely useless. Wasn't really that useful.
Is there any overlap in the languages, or
no, customs, traditions for sure. Yeah. An Islamic country. But no, besides sort of stuff that comes from the Quran.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
not
all
really.
completely different.
Completely different.
Man. Yeah. Because I know with, I'm not going to
gig.
try to make this comparison, but like with the Scandinavian countries,
Yeah.
a lot of it is like overlapping and certain words are different, but you can, for the most part, understand it.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if there was like at least
Those are
something that
tough
you're
languages.
like, yeah, like
maybe you
salam
can
alaikum,
understand
but
it.
I think that is
Salam alaikum, and that's about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Inshallah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much it. There's some traditions and some things overlap with that. But yeah, I mean, Afghanistan is very different than Iraq.
Right.
And, it's a Central Asian country. It's not a Middle Eastern country.
I was going to say, I mean, even geographically, it's
Yeah.
not considered the same.
Absolutely.
On a technical level, same region.
It's easy, for some people to lump it into the Middle East, but it's not the Middle East at all. And it's just completely different.
I've noticed people lump that, and then they also do entering into Iraq and Afghanistan at the same time. They're like, oh, it's all 2001. I'm like, actually, I mean, maybe I just sound like a massive nerd when I say this. I'm like, there was a 2-year difference.
Yeah,
so it's also two
two-year
different
gap
reasons.
and very different sort of intentions behind
Exactly,
all that.
circumstances.
Yeah.
I'm not going to force you to eat anything, but this stuff is very good. This beef jerky mix.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's try this out.
Is it just beef jerky, or is it's trail mix and beef jerky?
Dude, this is great. I completely take back anything I said about MREs being terrible. That is so good. I wish that existed when I was in the Marines. It's trail mix with beef jerky, and the beef jerky tastes great.
I have not had this one yet, so
All right. I'll actually finish this.
that was like real beef jerky.
Real
too.
beef jerky.
Wow, legitimate.
This has gotten a lot better.
Yeah,
Yeah, look at that.
cranberry beef jerky.
Yeah, this is a morning mix for sure.
Yeah,
I think I don't know if I'll go full tortilla, but
I was going to say, what did you get in yours?
I got recovery trail mix with pretzels, which would definitely be something I'd stick in the cargo pocket for sure. A toaster pastry, Pop Tart. This
Typically
is always a good sign for breakfast. I got chicken burrito bowl pouch. The tortillas I'd probably eat separately, and cheese spread. All you need is cheese spread, really.
Yeah. Did you get the jalapeno one though? Or
I
is it
didn't get
basic?
jalapeno cheese spread.
Oh man, did we both just get regular cheese spread?
So here's where we'd be trading.
This is where
I'd
we'd be
like
trading.
looking around like, hey, anyone get a jalapeno cheese spread? I'll trade you my toaster pastry.
It's the one of unfortunate thing that when you only have 2 people, the likelihood that you're gonna have tradable stuff.
I know. You gotta be squad level at least.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I got the coffee packet, no Tabasco sauce. I've noticed that they're. I don't remember if every single MRE had a Tabasco sauce or if they're starting to cut back on costs here.
I mentioned this podcast to my co-founder, who is a Annapolis grad and a Navy nuke, so not maybe a lot of field MRE time, but he was like, I just love that they always have a Tabasco. Like that's his favorite thing about an MRE. Yeah.
And yet I've been
bringing back.
disappointed so many times now.
I don't know if I got one. I mean, I got
I think
powdered hot sauce, which is wild. I've never seen this before.
we're not going in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, bring me back Avery Island's finest
Exactly.
Tabasco hot sauce for sure.
Absolutely unfortunate.
I got our beverage base powder lemon lime.
That is one of my favorites.
Way to make Gatorade powder sound terrible.
Yep.
Way to go, military.
I'm not gonna lie, I do save those, and whenever I want some, I keep them in my cupboard.
Yeah.
And I just pull it out. I'm like, I guess I'll have some Gatorade.
100%.
Dry roasted peanuts, obviously pretty. Those
are pretty good.
Pretty standard.
Yep.
Were you a big cracker guy?
I actually wasn't a cracker guy. Yeah.
I prefer the bread.
As a delivery device for jalapeno cheese spread.
Yeah.
It's definitely I think tortillas are number 1, so I'm happy about those.
Yeah.
The bread was definitely number 2.
Yeah.
Crackers number 3.
Are you a mix everything up in one? Like take the packet, dump it,
efficient.
shred up the.
Yeah. Did you ever heat your MRE? I was just, to me that was always just a real luxury if you had time to do that.
I was gonna say, so the next question I typically ask all my guests is, do you want to go heated or unheated?
Yeah. I mean, I think really getting traditional, we should go unheated.
We can go unheated.
Yeah.
I follow the guests.
Although maybe it'll be so much better of an experience to go heated.
It is a luxury. Listen,
These are pretty good. These pretzel trail mix. Yeah, you should
give those
definitely
a try.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
I'm a fan of the trail. Ooh, these do look good.
Yeah. That's solid, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would take that. That's good stuff to get at the PX and throw in your ILB and before you go to the field. I would buy this.
I did one of the last episodes. The bad part of this show is trying to talk with food in your mouth.
Yeah. Part of the charm.
Exactly. We zoom in on it and
Yeah.
really make people look bad. I had a bacon cheese spread, or was it jalapeno cheese spread and combos? And add a little bit of the cheese to the combos.
I forgot about the combos. That's a
That
deep
was a
cut
good.
right
That was
there.
a good.
That
good
would
combo.
that's a really highly tradable item.
Oh yeah. I feel like now the beef jerky has got to be like.
I mean, that was excellent.
That's going for
Yeah.
at least a packet of snooze.
Yeah.
Or, a
At
cigarette
least.
in the
Yeah.
foods.
Yeah. That might be a pack of cigarettes.
Yeah.
That's a good trade.
Were you sunflower seeds guy?
I was a dipper.
Really?
Yeah. Horrific. Yeah. Terrible habit. Took me forever to really break it. And I still haven't fully I'm still the on,
Yeah.
kind of snoozes. But
Did you pick that up in the military, or was that like a college thing? Or
I think it was like a high school lacrosse thing, and then definitely a college thing.
Yeah.
I never really liked smoking cigarettes
Right.
that much. I mean, I did in college and a little bit in the Marine Corps, long day, like whatever.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, you're
rip
just
a
like
butt,
chilling
but
with everybody.
more social than anything. But like, I loved dip. And honestly, if there were no adverse health consequences or just it wasn't disgusting and socially acceptable, I would love to dip today. It's the best.
It's the not a sponsor, not an endorsement.
No, I mean when I got out in like mid 2014, in the summer of 2014, I started a tech company. I was employee 7,
Yeah.
and I still like had a spit bottle and dip at my desk, and it did not go over well in San Francisco.
I was gonna say that is
it was pretty awful.
if you were down in the South, if you were in like the Southern like tech scene, I think nobody would bat an eye. But
No, they were not digging it. They were like, "You're disgusting, and you should probably stop that." So that pretty much ended that.
that's unfortunate. I mean, I did I'm just like, I think I just love salt. I'm surprised I haven't gotten kidney stones yet. But I would just have like the bottle of like the spit out sunflower seeds next to my desk, which maybe a little bit better at least. But
It's totally socially acceptable.
Yeah.
They'll just peg you as a baseball player and move on.
yeah, the biggest, I mean, I just remember I was in a training rotation in Germany, and a buddy of mine had 2 bottles, one for dipping and then the other one for drinking. And this was like at night, we're coming back from something. And I just remember it was like one of the squirt bottles too, and he grabbed the wrong one and then just.
I'd be lying to you if that hadn't happened to me 100 times. It's so
Honestly,
gross.
like one of the reasons, for many other reasons, why I wouldn't do that type of dip, I'm like, I would just yak.
Oh, as a good
immediately.
Swede, you knew the proper way. You were decades ahead of the US
exactly.
now.
It was like, guys, you got to go with the snooze.
Yeah.
And was I the trendsetter? Was I the one?
I think you should have gotten paid for this.
I think so.
Yeah, definitely.
The amount of times I've promoted Swedish snooze to my friends, I should at least get some sort of royalty.
I made that transition. That was the first one I did. I went to General, the little General minis, so it wasn't so visible in your mouth because I couldn't fully cut the habit. And then thank God these things came out. I mean, these are great. I'm not getting paid for this.
No, not a sponsor, but
on pouches.
Yeah. And so going back, you get to Credit Suisse.
I get to Credit Suisse, or Suisse, I think is the proper pronunciation.
I'm a terrible at
I always
pronunciation.
feel like I'm being like a kind of a douche if I say Suisse, but I think it's actually how you say it.
It's actually
it's actually
croissant.
Yeah, it's croissant. Yeah. So yeah, I get there. I had a great summer that first year. Market's ripping. We get back. It's the election year.
Yep.
And in September, we're back sitting around, ready to start senior year. We have a lot of us have our offers to go back to Wall Street, and it's like, kind of like the Hunger Games. Like we're sitting around the couch, in our house, like watching the news. First of all, watching financial news, CNBC, and it's like, oh, well, that Lehman offer you accepted, that's not there anymore. Barclays doesn't. Bear Stearns is gone. It's just like, it's wild. And that was I think that might have been the first time that I actually went down to the recruiter's office in Philadelphia.
Really?
And started talking to them because I was like, I don't even know if we're going to, much less have a job, but maybe this is like a terrible idea.
What, I guess, like, was that just what spurred, you're just like, the world's going down, like I've got nothing, and so let me go explore this? Or was there something else that you're like, well, I've wanted to serve, might as well now because...
Yeah, I had a hankering for it, and frankly, it just like, it didn't feel like it made any sense within the narrative of my life at that time, right? I mean, like, I don't think I even mentioned it really to friends in college or to my parents or to my family. And if I did, they were kind of like, yeah, like whatever, like go be a banker, you know? Yeah. I think that one, it was pretty boring to do banking at that time. It was a bad economy. And two, the nights are late. So I would just find myself at my desk, you know, midnight, 1 a.m., you know, turning some arbitrary, you know, Excel model or PowerPoint comments, you know, please fix. And I would just start like watching, you know, news or YouTube videos of, you know, I think at that point it was like was it the Marja push? No, I think it was pre-Marja push, but it was sort of the buildup of troops in Afghanistan.
I think that's the surge.
Yeah. I mean, and I was just like, what am I doing? You know? And so I went down to the recruiter's office in Philly. I did the Navy recruiter in Philly and then the Marine recruiter in Philly during college, and built like a relationship, and ultimately decided to move to San Francisco and take this job. But I you know, basically was sitting at my desk and watching videos, and you know, I just couldn't shake the thought. And so I contacted the recruiters in Philadelphia again. For some reason, you know, they were like, you got to take the ASVAB. So I took the ASVAB, and they're like, oh, you're a flight contract. Like, you got to go be a pilot. Yeah. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. Pilot. And let me start reconciling that with my head. Is that what I want to do? And I was like, okay, cool. I guess I'm a flight contract. That sounds cool. You know, and then, you know, I mentioned that to my parents. People were like, yeah, that sounds great. Go be a flight contract. Like, you know? And then somebody who was sort of mentoring me at the time, I had, you know, I was a beneficiary of good mentors who had military experience. You know, he's like, he and his wife are both Marines, now both retired Marines, but he, you know, he was prior enlisted, you know, infantry, scout, sniper, went to OCS or went to, you know, whatever, like, I guess, you know, whatever,
one of those acronyms.
whatever it is when you're, you know, prior. And then he's a badass. He stood up MARSOC. He worked, you know, in JSOC for a long time. He worked at, you know, OGA for a long time after that. And he was like, hey dude, like, have you ever like flown before? I'm like, no. He's like, well, maybe you want to like do some flying lessons before you sign up for 10 years of flying. How about that? I was like, that sounds like good advice. So I took some flying lessons. It was worse than driving in traffic in Midtown Manhattan.
Were you in like a little Cessna?
A little Cessna. I was like, this is not what I want to do with my life. Yeah. So I came back and said, I want a ground contract. Let's go.
Yeah. What made you look into the Marines and the Navy and not maybe the Air Force, Army, Coast Guard, etc.?
Well, hopefully that's obvious, but without maybe I have to state the obvious. Yeah, I mean, it was really going to be the Marines. I mean, I want to be among the best.
Few, the proud.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like it's the esprit de corps, the history, the swagger. I mean, everything about it like is what's attractive, and you know, obviously, you know, taking an 18 Delta contract or taking you know, a contract to go to Buds or something like that is really cool. And I've seen people do that. And in hindsight being 2020, maybe that's something I should have looked at. But if you're going to join a branch of service, it's just going to be the Marine Corps. And no apologies.
I mean, maybe a legend.
No apologies for that at all. You know.
You know, we like to accept all the branches, obviously the Army being one of the best, if not, I mean, the options, the versatility, but
yeah, I mean, totally true. I mean, it is a great, psyops perpetuated on the American people that, like, I mean, the Marine Corps might be the worst service of all. I mean, the fewest options, like the most, you know, constrained and the worst budgets, the worst stuff, you know, I mean, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, you know, you certainly, you know, drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, it's funny. I was looking at the Air Force and the Army. No, sorry. Army and the Marines. Hemming and hawing back and forth, the ASVAB, all that. And eventually became like a forward observer. And when I talked to the Marines, I'm like, well, how would I get into that? And they like, I'm going to forget what series it is. It's 13 in the Army. I forget what it is in the Marines. But they were like, you can't like come in as a forward observer. You come in as artillery.
Yep.
And then in basic and job training,
It's the same in the Marine Corps.
You then they select you for that. And I'm like, well, so if I go to the Marines, I could become
just a regular
like a cannon. Yeah,
like,
I
mean, you could be like slapping like howitzer shells into the breach.
Exactly. I'm like, no, like if I was artillery, I only wanted to be a forward observer.
And actually, you would have. I mean, honestly, maybe even for your entire first fleet tour, certainly for your like, you know, E1, E2, E3 years, like FOs are typically in my experience, I think they're all E3s or E4s.
Yeah. And the Army was like, no, you can get that specific MOS. And I'm like, cool. And they're like, you can go airborne. You can do this.
Like I said, they trap you with the uniforms. They trap you with the legend and the storied history.
Fighting dragons. Then, I mean, how much did that, you know, influence you seeing?
Oh, God, I mean, what an unbelievable PR, you know, push. Yeah. And I think like, you know, I mean, the artillery field in the Marine Corps is great because there's all sorts of ways you can, you know, derive. You can go be an Anglico.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get really varsity with fires in the Marine Corps. There's some great schools, but it's actually a really great MOS. Yeah. Everything is better on the enlisted side than the officer side. The officer side is much more constraining, and that was a huge lesson learned. It's a huge mistake.
Really?
Huge mistake.
I want to get into that. Why?
Yeah. I mean, look, if you want to do the military for a career, you want to spend 20, 30 years in the military. Yeah. I mean, it definitely makes sense in the long run to be an officer. If you want to do 4 years, and that was the original plan, and I switched my mind halfway through and then reverted back to forward. But if you want to do 4 years, I mean, I had a great experience. I got to run a Scout Sniper Platoon. I mean, I got to do all sorts of cool stuff, but like the guys who were in Scout Sniper Platoon who were, you know, college grads. I remember this one guy, you know, smart dude, went to like University of Maryland. We were about the same age. Yeah. And he's just looking at me. I can just tell he's just looking at me. He's like, you screwed up, man.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like he's like, I have it made. I have very little administrative responsibilities. No one's yelling at me. And I get to go to all the cool schools and do all the cool shit while you like need to do like officer, you know, paperwork.
Yeah.
Like,
and so you were an infantry officer in the Marines, right?
Yeah. So what I had was, you know, it's based on how you do, and then you pref your MOS selection. Okay. So in the Marine Corps, every officer goes through 1 6-month school that is a basic infantry, you know, course. It's called the basic school. And it doesn't matter if you're a pilot. So there's 3 contracts. There's air, ground, and law. So even our lawyers go through this 6 months, which is kind of, I mean, some of them are totally great, and they would have made great infantry officers too. But yeah, I mean, we all go through the same school, and that's sort of what keeps the tradition of every Marine a rifleman. It's sort of like your default Marine ethos. And so you go through this school and you compete with, you know, each class is probably 300 or 400 Marine officers for an MOS selection. And the second best myth and, you know, PSYOPs campaign perpetrated on Marine, young impressionable second lieutenant Marine officer in training is ground intelligence.
Yep.
They're like, you don't have to choose intel. You don't have to choose infantry. You can have you both. Yeah. And it's one MOS. And so you go to infantry officer course, become an infantry officer, and get an infantry officer MOS, and you're eligible for infantry billets. And also you go to intel school and you are eligible for intel billets. And like, it's a great path into recon. And MARSOC did exist. It's a great path into MARSOC. And like, you're like, yeah, that's what I want. And they only select like 10 of us out of that class. And I got one. I got a slot for ground intel.
Nice.
And so I was like pumped. I was, you know, went to IOC, which, you know, I believe is like one of the finest like schools like in the US military. I mean, just an unbelievable school. Part Ranger school, but very like intense. Yeah. They call it the Church of Violence. Like it is a very psychologically intense school.
How did it feel going from like the academics of Penn or even, you know, sports in high school to then like military academies and military schooling? Like, did you feel at all, I'm making a big leap here of like the rigors and intensity of like investment banking where you're staying up till 1 a.m. to like military schools. Cause like, obviously it's not very physical, but like mentally challenging for sure. Like,
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, look, some schools were more like intellectually challenging than others. And some coursework was more intellect. You know, when you do that 6-month, the basic school, I mean, there's stuff on fires and, you know, you're an FO, right? Like that stuff is pretty technical, right? You know, Scout Sniper schools are very technical, you know, like, you know, drop trajectory and ballistics and, you know, I mean, ballistic coefficient. And there's a lot of technicality in some military schools. Comms is super technical, again, as an FO. I mean, that was your lifeline.
The amount of times I had to save a PL or an RTO who didn't know how to encrypt radios.
Or just be better at their job than them so that you're never left hanging. You know, if you can't reach, you know, the battery and you can't reach, you know, the HIMARS and you can't reach air, like you're kind of combat, you're not condiv, you're totally combat ineffective. So comms is highly technical. So I actually, an Intel school was very technical. I think that there are a lot of intellectually challenging, you know, military, you know, on the level of Penn for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's the combination of the physical, the mental, the sleep deprivation. And every school's intention is different, right?
Yeah.
OCS is designed to make you quit. TBS is designed to put you under pressure and see, you know, how you perform and therefore rank you to your peers. Very competitive. IOC is, again, designed to make you quit before they put you in the fleet as an infantry officer. Ground intelligence officer course was designed to be, you know, really an MOS school, right? Like really educational and sort of like a pseudo accelerated master's program.
Yeah. What did you feel like you struggled with the most?
OCS, I did a good job of, and I don't know if you remember, you know, fondly or not fondly your boot camp days, but I like wanted to be right in the middle. Right. You know, I didn't want to be a spotlight ranger and I didn't want to be an underperformer. I also had no desire to have a leadership billet at OCS either. Like I just wanted to stay off the radar and not get hazed any more than I had to be hazed and just sort of, you know, do it. TBS was a tough school. The basic school is, you know, in my case, I graduated from OCS and commissioned the next day I started TBS. Okay. I actually graduated from TBS 2 days after I did INDOC for infantry officer course. Okay. So like I had a very like the perfect, almost like too tight timeline of these schools. Yeah. And I mean, one, you're beat after boot camp, you're beat after OCS to start a new school, 6-month school. You know, it's different, but I mean, you're totally shell shocked. You're like a automaton, right? Like the whole thing is, you know, break you down. I mean, you're like you're running around like saluting, like, I mean, you're a total robot. Yeah. So I just decompressing from that. That was a tough school because it was 6 months long. It was ultra academically competitive and physically intense. And the thing that really, if you got irritated and you lost your patience and you were an asshole, which, you know,
happens
when you're tired, it's not as hard, especially if you're not their leader. You're like, they're your peer and they're not like pulling their weight and you snap at them. That comes back in peer evaluations. And that was something I struggled with for sure. Like being an asshole. Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny because I feel like you should be from the Northeast then. If I guess maybe your time at Penn, maybe you got a little bit of that. A
little bit of all. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is tough. Like figuring out how to get along, especially in basic training where like, you know, like one person mess up and it's group punishment you're just like, oh my God, I want to like lose my shit. But
it's a win together mentality. And I think most schools are like that. TBS, you know, you're broken into platoons and then squads and there's leadership billets and some of the billets rotate, but you basically form a company, a large, you know, a plussed up company for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, people who aren't pulling their weight, it's tough not to get pissed off at them. Yeah. And then everyone's just tired and stressed out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was the transition then into, I don't want to call it the real world, the real military? Yeah. Like going from, so you did 6 months, I mean, what, a little over a year of training, 8 months?
I did 10 weeks at OCS, concurrent, and then, you know, consecutively did 6 months at TBS, consecutively did 10 weeks at IOC, and then I had a break for the Christmas holidays, and I started JIOC down in Dam Neck in Virginia Beach. Okay. Like, that was another 4 months, 3 months. I mean, it was 12 weeks, maybe 16 weeks. Yeah. I mean, it was about 15 months straight of school.
how is that transition then into real military where you just spend a lot of your time in the schoolhouse?
Yeah. I think that the early days when you hit the fleet, as we say in the Marine Corps, is always a little bit of a shock, right? You know nothing.
Yeah.
You're a butter bar,
Yep.
you know, especially, or you're a boot. In either way, you're a boot, right? Yeah. So it was tough. I mean, all the things that you know you're going to need to prepare for, like, you know, how to interact with a sergeant major and and a first sergeant and how to build rapport with your, you know, your senior non-commissioned officer leadership, like, right, your squad leaders, your platoon sergeant, like, you know, it is definitely a challenge. I think the hardest part so I went to 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, 3-7 in 29 Palms, California. You know, I got exactly what I wanted. I wanted an infantry battalion on the West Coast going to deploy. Yep. And I kind of thought that would be in Pendleton, but you know, 29 Palms is what I got. So I got what I asked for. Can't complain. It's a perfect Marine Corps experience. And I mean, 29 Palms, first of all, is a shock. I mean, that place is, did you ever go out there?
No.
You guys have a training area in like east of the Sierras in California, right? With like,
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I know the big ones on the East Coast.
Where were you stationed?
I was 173rd out in Italy.
Oh,
which then also has a training rotation in Germany.
Right.
And then 101st, which is Tennessee. So I know a lot of like the East Coast bases.
Campbell, right?
Yeah. So Tennessee, Kentucky border.
Yeah.
The West Coast ones I'm just like less familiar with.
Yeah. I mean,
probably is, but
look, the high desert is a beautiful place, but it's a bleak environment.
In photos, it looks great.
No, it looks good. I mean, look, Joshua Tree National Park is like an actual draw, right? And my house, I lived off base. My house was a 5-minute drive to an entrance to Joshua Tree National Park. Yeah. So like, there's that. But you know, the Marine Corps, and maybe that's not unique, maybe it's the military, they have a way of making anything not fun. And so that's an austere environment. You know, it's 115 in the summer.
Yeah.
It's, you know, freezing cold in the winter. And it's perfect because it's exactly like Afghanistan. We joked that, you know, they don't actually deploy us. They just fly us around, you know, for 25 hours. And then we land back on the other side of base in like a, you know, remote training area. I mean, it's really bleak.
And so you got deployed to Afghanistan, and then how long after you get to 29 Palms, how long between there and deployment?
Yeah, so 3-7 was a unit that had basically done 8 straight combat deployments. You know, Fallujah, Ramadi, you know, multiple in each of those, in Iraq, then shifting over to Northern Helmand Province in 2010. And then during that deployment, was a really tough deployment. They ripped with the British para unit in Sangin, in kind of eastern, you know, southeastern, kind of central eastern Helmand Province.
Yeah,
not too far from the Pakistan border, and you know, that was a really like terrible, you know, violent deployment for the paras and for 3-7. And then that is a notoriously bad deployment for the battalion that ripped with 3-7, 3-5. And, you know, I'm pretty close with a guy named Tom Schumann, and I sit on a board of his nonprofit. And that was the deployment when they ripped with us. That was a deployment that they lost General Kelly's son, Robert. I mean, I think Tom had like almost 50% casualties in his platoon alone. Yeah. I mean, it was like really bad. Yeah. And so it was a bad place. And, you know, I'm not in the military anymore, so I can say this, like there was no strategic value to it whatsoever. Yeah. You know, but being idealistic, you know, I really wanted to go to Afghanistan and at least, you know, sort of saw the connection between the 9/11 attacks that really spurred our generation to serve in many cases in the global war on terror and, you know, the place, Afghanistan. So it felt like there was no sort of nonsense around you know, why did we go to Iraq thing? I mean, it was pretty clear why we went, and at least initially, to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And so this is a battalion that's just been deploying constantly. I had guys in my first platoon that were, you know, on their 7th or 8th deployment, you know, and they were burnt out.
Yeah.
And the battalion was exhausted. And the leadership was exhausted. And so the first thing, that happened was, people rotated out and we started to rebuild the battalion and do our, get into our workup. And then in the Marine Corps, that starts with basic rifleman squad level skills, which was sort of easy stuff for me to, learn. And then it gets more complicated with the integration of other assets and fires and air and all sorts of stuff. So we did this entire workup and then deployed to Afghanistan.
Right. Out of curiosity, and maybe there's no answer to this, like how much of your thoughts on Afghanistan were developed while you were there versus like retroactively, like years later as you've gotten older and have had some time pass between being there and, growing old?
The Marine Corps, especially the infantry community in the Marine Corps, but I think it's probably true of all communities, they're big on reading, right? Yeah. And so they encourage us to read. They encourage us to like study history, and look at parallels, and all the counterinsurgency campaigns from Algeria to Vietnam, were sort of studied, part of coursework and part of sort of, professional military education. So I had, the graveyard of empires was certainly like front and center of my mind, right? Like, hey, this is a bad place where a lot of like, imperial sort of folly occurs.
Well, the fact that the British were there too, it's like historically this is not great if the British are going for round 2.
The Mongols couldn't conquer it.
Exactly.
The Alexander the Great couldn't conquer it. The Brits couldn't do it. The Russians brutally. And I wrote my thesis on really the Russian, kind of battle with the Mujahideen in the 80s. So like I had done a lot of, and that was in college. So I was probably more familiar with Afghanistan in the historical context of war than, others, than average, I would say. Still was, super excited to go. Right. I think I've shared this with most people who ask. But in my opinion, there's very little like strategically important about, for the United States, at least, about Afghanistan.
Right.
And in all the places in Afghanistan, there is, like, I think Helmand Province is probably the least strategically important place. And for some reason, the Marine Corps just decided to really, fight that one out.
Right.
And we stirred up a hornet's nest. Yeah. And I would compare Helmand Province in many ways to like, your classic really bad, gang neighborhood, right? Like you could say, parts of LA County, or you could, extrapolate it maybe to like Sinaloa or like, a place that's heavily disputed by cartels, lots of drug dealers, lots of gun runners and weapon smugglers, tribal dynamics that really, roughly mirrored Crips, Bloods, Jalisco cartel versus Sinaloa cartel. I mean, just sort of like unbridled hatred, but with no real major ethnic difference. I mean, tribal, Shoksai, just like totally, in my, I'm not a, people who really understand those tribal dynamics. I think it's easy to sort of make distinctions between the tribes, but they were all Pashtun, for example, right? I mean, it wasn't like Tajik or Uzbek, sort of ethnic differences. And it was just a messy Game of Thrones there. Yeah. And so we were sort of in there trying to throw money around, trying to throw force around, trying to like impose our will on a situation where, they haven't had a strong central authority maybe ever, in that part of Afghanistan. It's not Herat. It's not Kandahar. It's not, places that are actually really relevant to the country's identity as a national identity.
Exactly. I mean, I don't think it's why I asked about like retroactively, because I think a lot of my thoughts and understanding of Afghanistan weren't really formulated while I was there, but like years later when I eventually became like college educated, I was like, okay, like what were those experiences? And even for me, I was in the more northern area, so still on the Pakistani border, but more north, like Wardak,
Paktia, Wardak,
Logar, Wardak, and
that's a really bad place.
Yeah, and so it's up in these mountains. I mean, 9,000 feet, whatever elevation.
Yeah, we were high desert, so we weren't in the mountains like you were.
But it's all tribal, and there would be times where we'd hear gunfire, and we're like, "Are we taking contact?" It's like, "No, it's one town shooting at the other town." And we're like, "Well, why?" It's like because who knows? Like, there's a dispute.
I remember this dynamic so clearly. Like I remember there was this really cool but also super creepy FOB called FOB Zre, and it sat on top of the Kajaki Dam, which was really the region's most viable hydroelectric dam that the coalition forces were trying to, and USAID were trying to sort of like restore and provide electricity to the entire Sangin River Valley. I mean, that was a big part of, you know, the justification for caring about Sangin.
Yeah.
And so at FOB Z, you know, it's an old Russian base.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally was built by the Russians in the 80s. And which is creepy.
Yeah.
Right. It was nice and it was beautiful. It was a little bit cooler because it was sitting on top. Yeah. But it was like pretty cool. And I remember like every night we'd sit on like kind of the porch of one of the, one of the hooches and watch the laser light show of like tracers going back and forth between the ANA, you know, down below the high point we were at and you know, Taliban.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, it was very rarely, you know, at that time kind of directed at us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had people ask me like, what are your thoughts on Afghanistan? Like usually I go like, well, I'm not, you know, educated enough on it. Like, even though I was there, I don't think I have like a firm opinion, but kind of just like little sad, little unfortunate, like no real clear answer. I think to your point is like, there is this like, I don't want to say like helpless futility, but because I think for me, I always battle, I'm like, well, I think it's easy to say like the Taliban are not good people, right? Like
yeah, I would agree with that statement.
Like that's like not
it's not a controversial hot take.
Not a hot. You know, we do nothing but hot takes.
I mean, not even by not just Western standards, right? I mean, you can always
across
apply,
the board.
I think they by any standards they're
Exactly.
not a positive force for good.
Exactly, and like. It's funny because like I remember being there and like we would bring schools. I remember literally carrying a backpack full of school supplies.
Yeah,
I'm like, well, that is good, right? Like, I mean, we're trying to educate them. Weirdly enough, our cop was an abandoned schoolhouse, so a little bit of a weird juxtaposition there of like, we're going to get you educated.
We're going to militarize the only place you have to do education, but
also here's some education.
But here's some like school supplies, even though you can't write.
But then it's like, I don't think that it was just like, you know, right? The farmers there, like the Taliban come in and like, you're going to grow poppy seeds because they can sell it for, you know, their own supplies. And it's like, well, that's not good because, you know, poppy seeds can be used for drug trades. And like, that's objectively not good.
Right.
But also if you go there and you're like, here's $20,000, don't do that or whatever. Like
that's what we did. We basically paid them not to be drug dealers and drug producers and drug smugglers. And, you know, if it was sort of arbitrary because we were trying to figure out who actually is influential and powerful, right? And you pay this elder, the other elder gets pissed, and then you pay it both, or it swings, and it just creates all this. We created as much friction, I think, as we solved. Yeah.
So you mentioned maybe reenlisting, doing your like going back and forth. I guess like you come back from Afghanistan, pretty kinetic time. Like, is that the point where you go like no, I'm doing my 4 and getting out?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a great battalion commander and a great company commander. My first battalion commander and, well, second technically, but the first real one who was there for the duration. This guy named Ted Greeley. I saw him like last year. Actually, it was great. He's an amazing leader. And then this guy named Mike Simon was the company commander. And you know, Mike he'd done, I think maybe he didn't do the invasion of Iraq, but he was a light armored reconnaissance guy. So he was sort of like, you know, your mechanized infantry. And then also just a great infantry officer. He taught me a lot, and he was like really tough, Naval Academy wrestler. And those were great mentors to me. And that made me, along with some of the other people I really respected, our OPSO, Colin Chisholm, he was the COO of Tito's Vodka for a while.
Oh, okay, wow,
and now he's at a big, you know, one of the big defense tech companies.
That's
COO.
a shift.
Yeah. You know, and our XO Brian Middleton, like there were some really great mentors that I looked up to, and and a lot of, you know, sort of peer or slightly, you know, above peer group officers and enlisted, senior enlisted guys who I really admired. I was actually just texting last night with my second platoon sergeant, this guy named Dave Harvey, who's a LA County firefighter, who's just an awesome guy. And he was definitely a great mentor to me too. Yeah. So, I mean, I really enjoyed that. And yeah, I was pretty good. You know, I was a pretty good Marine officer, you know. my fit reps were great, and I was like, this is awesome. I love this. And so that was when I was sort of like, yeah, I definitely would want to stay for another 4 years and see what's going on. And then, the next kind of change in leadership that was sort of precipitated, without going into specifics, it wasn't great, and I think we had a really tough time. The whole battalion had a really tough time with that change in leadership. And the company commander I had, the next one was sort of like neither good nor bad, just sort of benign, good guy, good person, not particularly strong as a mentor. And then, I had a really, really tough, really bad, direct supervisor after that. And I think that is really what drove me out of the Marine Corps.
I feel like that's like a relatively common theme where it's like a shift in leadership that kind of goes in a different direction and kind of being a little bit of the thing that like forces your hand where you're like, maybe I'm on the fence, or like I would love to say, because that was exactly for me where I was like, I get to Campbell and I was like, I saw the good side of leadership, and now I saw the kind of like indifference, or maybe
they talk
not,
a lot. They use
great.
the word like command climate a lot, right?
Yeah,
it's sort of like it's sort of a proxy for like corporate culture.
Yeah,
right. And cultures shift, and you're always struggling, to sort of maintain a positive corporate culture. And sometimes you have ebb and flow, and even startups for sure. Something we work on a lot. I mean that the corporate culture, the command climate shifted, and then a couple of either benign or really, really bad bosses, and I was just like, signing up for another 4 years of this without the ability to quit, that's a tall order. And I was also older. I was like 27, right, at that point. So I was like, maybe
which is old man status. If anyone hasn't said, that's old man status.
I mean, really old. I mean, it's like now I feel really old at like 38 in a startup, but like that was like equivalently old man status in that environment with a bunch of 18 and 19 year olds.
Before we keep going, heated or unheated?
What do you think?
You decide.
It's guest honor.
Guest honor, yeah.
Do we have water to even
we do have
actuate
water.
the heater?
Water.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's
you want to go?
I'll heat it up. Let's heat it up.
I will say that it adds an extra point on the scale when you heat it up.
Yeah, cold hard MRE versus a warm soft MRE is always going to be better. Thank you.
When that happened, how much? Because I think you have to start deciding whether or not to re-enlist like 1 year out or 6 months out from the end of your contract.
So the way the Marine Corps works on the officer side is there's a concept called career designation.
Okay.
And career designation is, it depends on the needs of the Marine Corps, and it depends on, the budgeting and like, what the op tempo is. But, I think let's call it like height of the Iraq War.
Yeah.
It was like basically everyone got career designated.
Yep.
And then, sort of basically managing the workforce around the time this was happening, it was a competitive process.
Right.
And I have a lot of really good friends who I think were pretty good Marine officers who didn't get career designated. I did. Okay. I got career designated. And so there's a process by which you have to accept career designation. And then, Jesus Christ, what's going on?
I was going to say, are you a little
struggling here? I think it's just like folded up, trying to get it in there. Anyway, there's a process by which you have to accept career designation, and then that entails, another tour, a fleet tour. And so that was something I basically had 2 months to make a decision, and I was actually deployed at the time. So I'm in Afghanistan. It's been a long deployment. I'm thinking about coming home, and I'm like, what is the next, deployment look like in 3-7? What would I want to do for a B billet, and sort of to stick around, what would be compelling? And I looked at the opportunities, and I just said no.
If you need if you need a little sleeve for it, if it's getting too hot, but
I kind of just I always used to just sort of tuck it under my leg and appreciate the warmth. Yeah. So I think there's a muscle memory right there. But it is hot. So I turned it down. I turned down career designation. Look, everyone's replaceable everywhere. Yeah. Some people who had been really good mentors to me were maybe a little disappointed, but it was the right thing for me.
Yeah.
What I did end up doing though was, so because I turned down career designation, I really accelerated my like EA, like my sort of terminal leave process.
Right.
So I got back from that Afghanistan in end of March 2014.
Okay.
I was on terminal leave May 5th. It was quick.
That is a shift. So did you know what you were going to do afterwards? Or just like, I just know I'm going to get out. And then suddenly you're like, I guess I'm once a Marine, always a Marine, but a Marine civilian.
I got back. They were giving GMAT exams on base in 29 Palms, like the only useful thing they had on that base.
Yeah.
5 or 6 days after getting back, I took the GMAT cold.
Do you remember how you did?
Not well. Not well at all. And I put in a round 3 application to Columbia Business School.
Wow.
I had to come back to New York. And my parents were living in the city at the time again. And my younger brother was here, and my other younger brother was in college. One of the other impactful things that happened at that time was I had a really, really strong, Marine non-commissioned officer leader, that I worked with closely. And, he was sort of struggling with what he wanted to do next. And, we're stricter maybe than the Army and certainly than the Air Force about sort of like, fraternization, but he was my friend.
Yeah.
I cared a lot about him, and he was really good and really smart. And so I took him, I said, dude, you need to get out and you need to like go to college.
Yeah.
Like, this is a guy from a really small town in South Central Illinois. He left home when he was 17. I don't think he'd ever really left his county before that. And he saw the world and did a bunch of deployments and was an excellent. And he was like, the Marine Corps has sort of been my ticket to do all these things. Yeah. And I was like, you can always go back and with a college degree, either as an officer or enlisted if you love the Marine Corps, but get out and like, go to college. Just like enjoy life. And so I took him to Penn for spring fling. And we stayed at my old frat house.
That's cool.
With my youngest brother at the time, who was there, a sophomore. And like all the guys in that class were like so good to him. And actually they had been good to us while we were on the deployment. They sent care packages and all sorts of stuff. So they were really, really supportive. And so we got to meet all of them in person. And it like, he was like, I absolutely am getting out and going to college. And he ended up going to Columbia.
That's awesome. Wow.
And now he is, he helped me found GreenLite.
You had brought up earlier wanting the enlisted versus officer. And so to that point is why I sometimes am like, I wonder what my life would have been if I went the officer route. Now, granted, I don't think I could have even gotten into college after high school. But what I've noticed,
you went to Stanford, so I find that hard to believe.
Because I recovered on the second half. It was first half was rough. But one thing I noticed is I think the officer network is much stronger when it comes to the post-military figuring things out, right? Because like, okay, I mean, I came from middle-class America, suburbia, Massachusetts. Like I definitely, my sisters went to college, my parents went to college, so I knew that. But I have plenty of friends on the enlisted side where like I wasn't leaning on my enlisted friends.
Don't forget to put your cheese bread in. Exactly. Right? You got to get the hot cheese. I just remembered that. It occurred to me. Where
I wasn't really, leaning on my enlisted buddies to figure out college. It was, one, services school, which we had Alec on the podcast, so shout out to that one. But it seems like officers just understand like college education, MBA routes, I think business world.
I think it's true. I think that, so at one point in my post-military career, I lived in Austin, Texas, and I got to reconnect with a lot of guys who were in Scout Sniper Platoon, enlisted guys. And they're very close with each other.
Yeah.
A lot of them sort of got out and centralized in Austin, Texas, which is awesome. And that was really cool to see. But I would agree, apart from those guys from Scout Sniper Platoon, who were a really small, tight-knit community anyway, I haven't really seen that same sort of coherence of community around the same way that I'm close with, peer, senior, junior officers that I worked with in the Marine Corps.
Right.
Yeah.
I think to each their own. And I wouldn't trade my enlisted experience because, of course, like obviously things ended up fine.
Yeah.
But I noticed just the I think the support network is just slightly different between the two sides.
I think you're right, and I think that support network and that community that I had with with fellow officers, especially ones that got out and I'm still very close with to this day, was a big reason why I felt like I didn't feel like I needed to go back and get my MBA. Yeah. That's why I ended up actually. So I got into Columbia that summer. And I was going, and while waiting to start Columbia, New York if you don't have a job, New York is a lonely place, man.
Yeah. Which is weird because there's 9 million people here, but it can be incredibly isolating.
Everyone's grinding.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting around, frankly, having a tough time with my transition before I decided to do the reserves that summer too, and drinking too much and just sort of just not being very productive, and so I'm like waiting for school to start in August and not really excited about getting my MBA. And having a really tough time. Starting the reserves, a unit here in New York City, or in the New York area in New Jersey, going to be a rifle platoon commander again. Like that helped a lot.
Really?
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was all fired, FDNY and NYPD and just guys with a bunch of deployments. And the company commander was a recon major and a construction professional in town here. All those guys, I'm very close with, the first sergeant at the time, now retired Sergeant Major, Jorma Fitchie, very close with Caleb Weiss, the company commander, and very close with those guys. That saved me a lot. Right. But I still needed a new mission, and it wasn't going to be business school for me. And so I started interviewing at tech companies, and I was like, what is a tech company? Like, what is tech? Right. I had no idea. I knew what banking was. I knew that if I got my MBA and got out, I could go be an associate. But I was like, that feels like I lost 7 years. Yeah. So, I mean, like, what is this? What is this startup thing? Yeah. Right. And so, I did some of the obvious interviews. Like I actually just reconnected with a recruiter at Palantir, who was my recruiter at Palantir, which made a lot of sense because we used Palantir a lot in the military. And surprise, surprise, he wanted me to move to McLean, Virginia and work the government angle. And I did not want to do that. Yeah. So I was like, nope. But, and then I ended up taking a job at my very first startup. In San Francisco as employee 7, and I had within a couple weeks really a new mission, and I think it really saved me from like what was going to be a really bad transition for me.
Are you able to say what the startup was?
Yeah. It was called Lux Valet.
Okay.
And shortened just to Lux. LUXE.
Yeah.
And look, I talked to a bunch of companies that did a bunch of different things that only now, 11 years into my venture-backed career, do I actually understand what they mean? Like things like content marketing platform and stuff like that. But Lux was really simple. So I'll stop for 1 second. I just don't want to spill the hot water.
Oh yeah, that's I just kind of lean it against. Yeah.
I made that mistake before. Yeah. So Lux was really simple. My job was to come in and run the San Francisco market for a on-demand valet parking application.
Got it.
I was like, okay, parking cars, logistics, operations, people, staffing. I was like, I know how to do this shit. This is gonna be great. So it was really accessible to me. And more importantly, and then this was more luck than anything else, is the founders were elite. The people they hired were really good, best in, people from YouTube and Google and Zynga and like kind of really elite, technology companies. Yeah. And we raised a ton of money, like $100 million in like the 2 years I was there. And spent it very quickly too, but that's a different story. But yeah, I just really lucked out and was obsessed with the pace and the people and and frankly the career advancement opportunities. And I came in, I was a buck captain, which I won't complain. You make decent money in the military, but I took a serious pay cut to be employee 7 at a seed stage startup. Yeah, I mean I did not make a lot of money. And I lived in San Francisco, which then was very expensive. Very affordable. Yeah, really affordable place. And so, I really took a bet on this company and these mentors and this mission and myself that jump started my last 11 years, now my third third career in sort of venture-backed startups.
Do you feel like startups are a great first job after the military?
I think they are a great first job as long as you go in like eyes wide open with expectations managed. And also as long as you really do a proper evaluation and assessment process for the startup that you're joining. And I know that your path was different, but you had Stanford, kind of as a grooming ground. I don't recommend you leave the military and start something necessarily right away.
I agree. Yeah.
But I do think it's a great place to go really accelerate your career, build an entirely new set of skills that are super transferable, and do that. And so, I didn't have to worry about raising money. I didn't have to worry about the capitalization of the company, right? I got to, really lean into where I could add value and learn areas where I, needed to improve. I got to work for really smart people who gave me a chance, took me under their wing. It was not a lucrative first startup for me.
Right.
And so it wasn't a big money-making opportunity, but, within 2 years, I had sort of gone from being, sort of an mid-entry level sort of operations manager type employee to like maybe not executive team, but almost executive team. And that gave me the foundation for my next company to be the first employee and COO immediately.
Yeah.
And so it definitely can pay off as long as you understand that, startups can't pay you a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it's really about career acceleration and learning.
To your point of how you found that the reserves in New York helped you with that kind of transition process, what I find is startups are a good opportunity to ease yourself back into the civilian world, because I found, for the most part, startups, especially early stage ones, like small team, common goal, sometimes very ambiguous goal, like metrics that you're trying to track or figure out together. And obviously the military is a gigantic bureaucratic system, but at least
small units or
small
startups.
units, exactly. Like
you restart them every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
You have to deal with a lot of ambiguous information. You're trained in frameworks for decision making and problem solving, OSMIAC, 5-paragraph order, troop leading steps, like all that kind of stuff, depending on the level, all the way up to like MCPP and R2P2, sort of strategic theater level operations. And those are great frameworks for applying to business.
And so I find that if you're used to like the platoon level mentality or company level mentality of like, all right, we're going to go on this mission. Where are we going to lay guns? Blah, blah, blah. What assets are we going to have? Like those translate really well to the startup world in comparison to big corporate, which I think is more like I did equity research my first summer and I hated it because there was no, what's the word? Not onus, self-determination. I'm going to blank on the right word here, but it was just like, just do this, which happens in the military
This is
too,
delicious, by the way.
right? So 1 bite score out of 10. What's your stance on this?
Let's give it a 10 compared to how I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And then, how I remembered it or like had it in my head. Like overall, this is a solid 7.5 lunch.
Yeah.
I mean, I heated up the jalapeno, or not jalapeno, but the cheese spread. Critical. I chose well on this this chicken burrito bowl.
Yep.
It's got beans. I mean, is it Chipotle? No, but it's a damn fine approximation of Chipotle.
It hits the job, honestly.
Yeah.
It's like between this and like a Chef Bar ID.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like you're
Do you want to try this one?
I'll take
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Take a bite?
Here.
Have you had this one before?
I don't think this.
I don't know if we had the burrito bowl. I think I had something similar. What is this?
That is the
Pizza?
Italian sausage.
Italian sausage. Oh, nice.
That
Damn, that sausage is pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like a Hot Pocket, better than a Hot Pocket, I'd say.
Like in a pinch, not bad at all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would be really pumped about having that one.
Big improvements, I think. Or my memory's just off, but I'm like fairly certain they were much worse back in the day.
I mean, 9 years later, I'm pleased with the outcome for sure.
I'm just waiting for them to like get a new leap in tech. I don't know why Palantir and Anduril and all those other defense. I mean, they should be hyper focused on MREs.
I agree. Feels like a market opportunity here.
Exactly. It's like 3 companies that
we've both been in food though, and we know that
it's not a great,
not a great way to make money.
Not a great way to make money.
There's this whole perishability thing, but hey, these things aren't perishable.
That's what I'm saying. It's actually, it might be the greatest thing ever because 5-year shelf life.
Yeah.
You don't actually have to worry about it.
Is there actually an official shelf life, or is that unofficial?
It's apparently very unofficial because there's an inspection date or like a test date. But I don't think there's any official
I'm pretty sure I ate some MREs from like the Panama or Grenada invasion.
It's
for sure.
it just adds flavor.
Definitely Operation Desert Shield.
Exactly. It's not. I've like tried looking it up online. We try to get ones that are like inspection dates recent. But there's others where like you can get it. It's like 10 years in the past. I'm like, I guess you could probably eat it.
I think if I took a whole grain tortilla and crumpled it up in here, it would probably enhance the flavor.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
So getting into, we get to your first startup. How do you get then from there to now starting GreenLite?
Yeah. I mean, I have a very linear sort of like GreenLite is the natural evolution of my, venture backed operating career. And I give this speech a lot, 6-7 times a week to investors. So, it's pretty well rehearsed, but let me try to not speak to investors.
The
hands thing, the temple, steeple. Let me try to let me break this down Barney style, as you would say. So instead of going to join a startup, doing something I didn't really understand, I went to a startup where I thought that I'd have some baseline sort of like accessibility to it, right? And it was parking, logistics, pickup, delivery, people, and that's that's military operations stuff, right? What I didn't appreciate at the time, but now fully appreciate in hindsight, is that I've always gravitated towards startups with a big, real estate, physical built world component. And I know Pico Mart is very much that, which is where we sort of met and overlapped. And then I also I've gravitated to getting really good at dealing with regulators, local municipal authorities. So the 2 common threads in my startup career are really, a minor in real estate development and maybe sort of a master's in dealing with regulators and government affairs, which, I think military training trains you well for as well. How do you speak to people in positions of authority in government, and how do you build rapport with them across a bureaucratic organization? And so, Lux was very much that. Parking's heavily regulated, right? It's unionized in many cities. Where you can pull over and have a curb cut to collect a car is regulated. And parking is a physical real estate business. It's a covered asset land play. It's an asset management play. The next business, Good Uncle, was building ghost kitchens on college campuses. So again, physical real estate development, and working with regulators to deliver and also get these kitchens built, construction permitting and zoning and entitlements, city council meetings, those kinds of things. So, you're starting to see the pattern here. Yeah. We sold that business to Aramark after 3.5 years. I did not want to go work for Aramark. And so, the next company, I was still fascinated by this sort of why is real estate development so broken and so hard and so opaque? And why is permitting especially like a black box? And so I built what we called Bandit. I partnered up with a guy named Max Crowley, who was an early Uber employee, employee 20 at Uber, really early. And we, he was really focused on the brand and the concept of the specific retail concept that we started testing with. And I was really obsessed with prefab modular construction as a way to get around the regulatory environment. Could I convince New York City that we weren't actually doing a construction project at all and we were just installing equipment that was built in a factory in California? And the answer was yes. That's how Bandit was born. So a lot of the things that you probably remember of trying to get health inspections install construction permits, demo permits, etc. We skipped the permitting part. In collaboration, walked into New York City's office and convinced them of this.
Is that why you have less gray hair?
Yeah, I mean, I
Because
think I just got a haircut.
that you're in should be a lot more gray hair.
Yeah, I think I just got a haircut and it's just hiding. Yeah, I mean, I can, that was the next logical step, and that worked really until it didn't, because we bet big on New York City office, and then the pandemic shut down New York City office, and we had to move the business down to Texas, where the pandemic didn't exist, and restart again. So, and when in the process of restarting that business in about 60 days, Gopuff watched what we were doing and they acquired us.
Wow.
And so, very much a situation of better to be lucky than good.
Yeah.
And so now I got to take my thesis of prefab modular construction, brand building in like SoftBank scale, right?
Yeah.
Like, billions of dollars in resourcing. And, we did almost 100 kitchens across 32 states in 9 months. I hired 800 people on my team.
That's wild. Yeah.
I mean, it was wild. So again, real estate, construction, development, not my job, but a big part of what I had to, a big part of my constraints.
Yeah.
Right. And then working with regulators, will cities let us do this? Will they give us permission to do this? Not just construction permitting, but to operate. Come in the downswing from that big push at Gopuff. I looked at my now co-founder, Ben, who in addition to having become like a really close friend of mine, and obviously my business partner, is also a military veteran. He was a Naval Academy grad and nuclear SWO. And so we had a lot of shared DNA, right?
Yeah.
And how we looked at the world and how we organized our teams. And I talked to Mike, who was that guy that I convinced to go to college. He went to Columbia and had a great career since Columbia. And then his friend Nathan, who helped start us, helped GreenLite start, still here as our founding engineer. I was like, guys, let's go tackle this permitting problem. We really understand it, all of us, because we've lived this sort of, had felt so much pain in permitting and lived this problem. And that's really how the GreenLite is an evolution of all of those businesses.
Right. Yeah. Like experiencing those pain points, going through it yourself, and then saying like, how do we now solve that?
Exactly.
I'm trying to ask this question in a non-offensive way. Why do you keep hurting yourself? In the sense of like, I mean, like, by no means are the industries that you're in like easy. How are you? Is it just like intrinsic motivation?
Why
is
am I
it just
such
like
a masochist?
Yeah, I mean, like, what's driving you to just like keep doing really hard stuff? And I know that sounds like a silly question, but
look, I don't think people who haven't done it truly fully appreciate like how hard it is to start a company.
Yeah.
Really, especially a company with high expectations of high growth, right? I certainly gain a new appreciation for it every time I do it, right? I mean, at Employee 7, I didn't start it, but I helped build it. Employee 1, I really helped start it. I mean, we didn't have a payroll or a Delaware C Corp designation when I started. Next company I started, GreenLite I started. It's so much harder and more like emotionally taxing than I think anyone really can truly empathize with unless having lived it. Why do I gravitate to these types of businesses? I mean, I fundamentally believe that the way we, do pre-development, in America makes us unable to compete, at all. I mean, I think it's a horrible, it's enormously unfair. You need to have institutional capital to build in our cities. Like you can't be there, if you want to plunk your life savings in and open the restaurant of your dreams, no way, not anymore. You'll never get through permitting. It's it's going to cost 3 times as much and take twice as long. Yeah. And that's fundamentally unfair. And I think it's making us less competitive. So I really believe in this mission. And I've always been intellectually interested and just curious, since I first gained exposure to it at Lux in real estate development, how to make that more transparent, how to make that cheaper and faster, and less of a black box. It's always been something I've been curious in because it's always been an obstacle to growth for every business I've built. So I think intellectual curiosity is part of it. And then the third thing is, look, I'm not the guy to like sit around an accelerator or a EIR program, or like I love the Atomic guys. They're so smart, and I'm really was impressed by Jack Abraham and that whole team at Atomic, and almost went to join them. But when I really looked in the mirror, I'm not the guy that can look at a basket of 5 ideas and test them and then go all in, be really excited about the idea that, tests the best.
Yeah.
Right. Like I have to do something that I believe in, that I see an opportunity in, and that I'm intellectually curious in solving, especially knowing what it takes to start a company.
I don't mean this in a negative light. Do you consider yourself stubborn? In the sense of like, why is it this way? It shouldn't be this way. We can fix it. And like in the stubborn mentality of like, this shouldn't be the way that it is.
Yeah, stubborn in the sense that like, this is a fixable problem.
Yeah.
Right? It's not, I could prescribe policy. I could prescribe process. I could prescribe technology. And I think it's all 3 to really solve this problem.
Right.
To properly solve the problems with construction, permitting, and development in this country.
Yeah.
If it wasn't obviously solvable, I think I'd be a lot less stubborn about it.
Right.
It's a pragmatic stubbornness, I'd say.
Right.
Like and a refusal to sort of accept this for our country.
As we wrap up, like what does the future hold, and are you happy?
Yeah. Like look, every startup, as you know, is an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
The highs are so high, the lows are so low. And one of the things I tell people, sort of jumping into this journey, either with me or, on their own or whatever, is like, the best you can, your North Star of how to cope and be successful doing this is sort of, to be, to shoot for what I call emotional homeostasis, right?
Yeah.
Like, the high shouldn't be so high, the low shouldn't be so low, and you should sort of like modulate and try to, hit the, try to be in the middle the whole time. As always, that's aspirational. That's incredibly ambitious. I've never seen anyone be perfect about it, and I'm far from perfect on it.
Yep.
So there are times where, like I'm really loving GreenLite and like what I'm doing. And there are times where I'm like, oh my God, I'm so emotionally exhausted.
Right.
But I really believe in what we're doing. I love the team we've built, almost 40 people now, and like really fantastic people. The business is crushing, which is great. So things are going well. And there are always, usually very human challenges that come into play. And the problems are different at different stages of the business. The future for GreenLite as a business is bright. And I hope that I, continue to kind of evolve and grow to be GreenLite's leader, along with some amazing leaders like Ben and other people on the team that we get to work with. And, if I feel like I can meet that standard, I want to be, that leader. But if I can't, I certainly believe in the business, and I would go out and find, a better leader.
It's funny. The emotional homeostasis is, I always go like, don't anger the startup gods. I'm not a superstitious person, except when it comes to startups. So like something good happens, I'm like, I don't know. Like,
ignore it. It's not happening.
Like,
it's not happening. Yeah.
The startup gods refuse to let me be happy. And I say that joke, like I am happy. I enjoy what I'm doing. But the second I get a little too happy, they find out and they're like, we're going to throw a wrench into this. Like something will happen. And so I'm always very cautious. Something good happens, I'm like, something bad's right around the corner. That's going to...
It's Murphy's Law, right?
Yeah.
We learned that in the military.
Yeah.
And like whatever bad that can happen will happen, and mitigate it. And then don't ride the highs too high and get too over exuberant. That's the world we live in.
Yeah. James, so great to have you on.
Holden,
I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. It was really fun.